There is a moment in every conflict when a single strike changes everything, not just on the battlefield, but in the psychology of power itself. That moment may have just arrived at Kharg Island. What we are witnessing is not a routine exchange of force. It is a calculated shift in tempo, a deliberate attempt to seize control of escalation and redefine the boundaries of this conflict. The kind of moment historians later point to and say, this is where the trajectory changed. The strike on Kharg Island was not symbolic. It was designed with precision, executed with intent, and aimed at impact far beyond immediate destruction. Reports indicate that more than 90 Iranian military-linked sites were hit in a coordinated assault. These were not random targets. They were carefully selected nodes in a larger network, logistics hubs, defensive installations, command structures, and infrastructure tied directly to Iran's ability to sustain both military operations and economic output. This was not just an attack, it was a systems level disruption. To understand why this matters, you have to understand a critical concept in modern warfare: escalation dominance. In simple terms, escalation dominance is the ability to control the ladder of conflict, to ensure that every move you make forces your opponent into a weaker position, even if they respond. It's not about winning one battle. It's about shaping the entire sequence of events that follows. The Kharg Island strike signals an attempt to climb that ladder quickly and decisively. Kharg Island itself is not just another location. It is one of the most strategically vital points in Iran's entire economic and energy infrastructure. A significant portion of the country's oil exports passes through this island. Tankers load here. Revenue flows from here. Influence radiates from here. When you hit Kharg Island, you are not just targeting a facility, you are targeting a nation's economic heartbeat. And when the economic heartbeat is threatened, the consequences do not remain contained. They spread outward rapidly and unpredictably. Oil markets respond first. Prices spike not only because of actual supply disruption, but because of perceived risk. Traders don't wait for confirmation, they react to possibility. Insurance rates for shipping lanes surge. Freight costs increase. Supply chains begin to tighten. This is how a strike in one location begins to affect economies thousands of miles away. The Persian Gulf is one of the most critical choke points in the global energy system. Any instability here immediately raises alarms worldwide. Countries that rely heavily on imported energy begin contingency planning. Strategic reserves are evaluated. Emergency measures are discussed. Governments understand that even a temporary disruption can trigger long-term economic consequences. But the true gravity of the situation lies not in the immediate aftermath. It lies in the response that follows. Because in conflicts defined by escalation, every action demands a reaction, and not just any reaction, a calculated one designed to restore balance or assert dominance. Iran's military doctrine is built precisely for these moments. It is layered, flexible, and designed to operate across multiple domains simultaneously. Missile systems, drone networks, proxy forces, cyber capabilities, these are not theoretical assets. They are integrated components of a broader strategy designed to ensure that no strike goes unanswered, and more importantly, that any response creates pressure not just on the attacker, but on the entire system surrounding them. This is where escalation becomes exponential rather than linear, because once escalation dominance enters the equation, the rules change. It is no longer about proportional response. It becomes about overmatch. One side acts, the other responds more forcefully. That response triggers another escalation. The cycle accelerates. Each move raises the stakes. Each decision carries greater risk. And with every step up the ladder, the room for de-escalation shrinks. This is the danger zone of modern conflict, the point at which control becomes fragile. Leaders are forced to make decisions under pressure, often with incomplete information. Communication channels become strained. Signals are misinterpreted, intentions are questioned. In such an environment, even a small miscalculation can trigger a disproportionate reaction. And then there is the psychological dimension. High-impact strikes, like the one on Kharg Island, are not just about physical damage. They are about perception. They are designed to send a message, not just to the opponent, but to allies, adversaries, and the global audience. Strength, weakness, resolve, hesitation, these are all interpreted in real time. If one side appears decisive and controlled, it gains leverage. If the other appears reactive or uncertain, it invites further pressure. This psychological layer is often what drives escalation forward, even when strategic logic might suggest restraint. No leader wants to appear weak in a moment of crisis, and that pressure can push decisions toward confrontation rather than compromise. Meanwhile, the international system begins to react. Allies reassess their positions, diplomatic channels activate, intelligence agencies increase monitoring. Organizations like NATO begin internal consultations, not necessarily for direct involvement, but for contingency planning. Because the implications of a conflict like this extend far beyond the immediate participants, global institutions also begin preparing for secondary effects. Economic shocks, humanitarian crises, disruptions to trade and travel, and in the most serious scenarios, the risk of escalation into unconventional domains. This is where the conversation shifts from regional conflict to global security. One of the most concerning aspects of targeting critical infrastructure is the precedent it sets. Once energy facilities become legitimate targets, the threshold for future actions lowers. What was once considered off limits becomes part of the battlefield, and that shift can have long-term consequences for how conflicts are conducted moving forward, because infrastructure is not just strategic, it is civilian adjacent. Its destruction affects populations directly. Fuel shortages, power outages, economic instability, these are not abstract outcomes. They are lived realities. And when civilian impact increases, so does international pressure. Calls for restraint grow louder. Diplomatic urgency intensifies. Yet at the same time, the logic of escalation continues to push in the opposite direction. Each side seeks to maintain leverage. Each side fears that stepping back will be interpreted as weakness. This is the paradox of escalation. The more dangerous the situation becomes, the harder it is to de-escalate. The Kharg Island strike sits precisely at this intersection. It is both a tactical action and a strategic signal. It demonstrates capability, intent, and willingness to escalate, but it also triggers a chain reaction that extends far beyond the initial event. Now the focus shifts to what comes next, because the next move will define the direction of the conflict. Will it be a measured response aimed at stabilizing the situation, or will it be a forceful escalation designed to reassert dominance? The answer to that question will shape not just the immediate future, but the broader geopolitical landscape. There are multiple pathways from this point. Controlled escalation, where both sides test limits without crossing critical thresholds. Rapid escalation, where actions and reactions accelerate toward broader conflict. Or managed de-escalation, where diplomatic channels succeed in containing the situation before it spirals further. Each pathway carries its own risks and consequences. Controlled escalation can still lead to unintended outcomes. Rapid escalation increases the likelihood of widespread instability. Managed de-escalation requires coordination, trust, and timing, three elements that are often in short supply during crises. And then there is the underlying reality that makes all of this more complex: the interconnected nature of the modern world. Economic systems, energy networks, political alliances, they are all deeply intertwined. A disruption in one area quickly spreads to others. This interconnectedness amplifies both the impact of conflict and the urgency of resolution. What makes this moment particularly significant is the combination of factors at play: strategic targeting of critical infrastructure, the presence of escalation dominance dynamics, the involvement of major regional and global actors, and the broader context of existing geopolitical tensions. Together, these elements create a situation that is both volatile and consequential. As events continue to unfold, one thing remains clear: the Kharg Island strike is not an isolated incident. It is part of a larger narrative, a narrative defined by competition, strategy, perception, and power, a narrative that is still being written in real time. And in that narrative, control is everything. Control of escalation, control of perception, control of outcomes. Lose that control, and the situation can spiral beyond intention. Maintain it, and there is still a path, however narrow, towards stability. Right now, the the world is watching closely, not just for what has happened, but for what will happen next. Because in moments like this, the future is not determined by a single event, but by the silsila of decisions that follow it. Decisions made under pressure, in uncertainty, with consequences that extend far beyond the immediate horizon. And as that sequence begins to unfold, one question remains at the center of it all: who truly holds escalation dominance and for how long?